Alright, so here's the Dreamcast. I don't have that many for the system. I just recently rebought it. I sold it when the Xbox came out, I believe. Well, I sold it at some point, to tell you the truth. I don't remember when, though. In any event, here's the games I have been able to acquire for it since. Here we have Sonic Adventure 2. This is essentially a 3D Sonic game, and I didn't really like it all that much. When the Dreamcast was new, I mainly played Sonic Adventure 1 and rather enjoyed it. Here we have Marvel vs. Capcom, and as you can see, yeah, it's burnt, but you know what? The way I see it, I had this game on the original. Most of the games here I had bought for the system quite a long time ago, and, well, if you can do that, if you can save money, well, I try to. Marvel vs. Capcom is a fairly decent fighting game. Well, fairly decent is a massive understatement, unfortunately. This is one of my favorite fighting games of all time. It has great music, and I can actually pull off some of the combos, which makes it even better. Here we have Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. This is a classic Resident Evil game in that it uses that terrible camera system. However, I do like it. The reason being, you have infinite typewriter ribbons. For those that don't know, in order to save in Resident Evil, you have to use typewriter ribbons. And you have a limited number of them, and it takes up inventory space. Here, it's unlimited, which means you can actually save. Wow, they actually got a basic part of gameplay done. Done right. Also, you have plenty of weapons, and you actually have plenty of bullets, and you actually have plenty of band-aids, which is always good. Essentially, this is what you would call a game. Here is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I assume the reason the disc case is empty is because it's probably still in the system. This is actually a game that I like a little bit more than Marvel vs. Capcom 1. The only thing I don't like about it is the music. It has a much better cast of characters, but the music is just terrible. Whereas in Marvel vs. Capcom 1, you had a very driving soundtrack, whereas in this one, it's just sort of like light jazz almost. Here we have Sonic Adventure 1, another game I had for the system a long time ago. Essentially, it's an exploration third-person style game. It's really kind of hard to quantify, unfortunately. I actually never beat it back in the day, and I still haven't today. And here is Resident Evil Code Veronica. I never played it back in the day, and I read so many times that it was one of the greatest games of all time. Never even got past the first level. Here is Metal Slug. It's essentially a port of the Neo Geo CD version. And what can I say? I already did a video on it. It's pretty good, but with MAME, it's obsolete. Here we have Unreal Tournament. This is one I never actually played, and so I thought I would download it and try it on the Sega Dreamcast, and I found it to be absolutely mediocre, and I didn't enjoy it too much at all. Here we have Hydro Thunder. This was one I played in the arcades quite a bit. I enjoyed it, mainly because the arcade machine was really quite cool. It was like, it rumbled a bit, and it really felt like you were driving an arcade-style boat. I always liked being that one boat that looked like the Scion Raider. It just was a lot of fun to play. Alright, let me just say again, damn, that's a lot of games! So let's begin. Here we have Star Trek Conquest. This is sort of like an RTS and sort of like a starship combat game similar to Star Trek Starfleet Command 3. It's not bad, it's just extremely mediocre. One of the funny things, though, is all of the admirals you can get for the Federation aren't even human. They take characters that were either controlled by aliens or aliens themselves. By which I mean, they weren't exactly part of Starfleet. Here we have Metal Gear Solid 2. Oh, how I hate the Metal Gear Solid 2. I never even got off the first level. It's just, ugh, angering. Mortal Kombat Armageddon. It's a fighting game that includes just about every character in the Mortal Kombat universe. But I really liked the Creative Fighter feature. It really did allow one to expend creative juices. Oh wait, that sounded absolutely disgusting. I retract that. It allowed one to be very creative. How about that? Here we have Star Wars Bounty Hunter, featuring everybody's favorite Mandalorian, Jango Fett. His game was mediocre at best. It's just a third-person shooter. It's an action platformer that really is not very good at all. It's one of those games where you go through the first level and say, I'm not doing that again. You go find the cheat codes and you just sort of play through it and forget about it. Here we have Metal Slug Anthology. We get just about every Metal Slug game known to man, and it's pretty good, except Metal Slug 5 has terrible sound quality. It's actually inferior to the port on the PSP. And Metal Slug 6 is also terrible. The port for the PSP was vastly better than this, unfortunately. But it still is a ready way to get all the Metal Slugs in one package. Unless, of course, you use MAME, which would probably be a better idea. Here we have Guitar Hero. This was the sole reason why I bought a PS2. This game is awesome. I mean, rocking out to your favorite guitar-heavy songs? You can't really go wrong with that. And then here we go with Guitar Hero 2. It's like air guitar, only better. With an even better track list, except I must say, I barely got through Freebird. I played it on hard. It took me forever to get past it, but it was worth it. Here we have Mortal Kombat Deception. This includes the original game and a port of Mortal Kombat the arcade, which was really quite good because I've always wanted that. You know, I bought this before I even knew MAME existed, so it's kind of obsolete now, but who cares? Mortal Kombat Deception, I think it was the first to introduce an actual story mode to it. It was like a third-person thing where you went around and tried to locate some parts of some magical MacGuffin, essentially. It wasn't too bad, but I never really enjoyed it all that much. Here we have Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock. Oh, this game was such a letdown. I basically played it maybe 3 or 4 times to unlock all the songs. It was definitely not worth the price I paid for it. And there we have, and yes, I do own it, Guitar Hero Encore Rocks the 80s. I enjoyed Guitar Hero probably more than I should have. And so when they came out with this one, I had to buy it. I was able to beat it in one day, and I think I barely played it afterward. I certainly haven't played it in probably 3 years. Really, I think the sole motivating reason that made me buy this was so I could play Electric Eye. I just loved that song. Here we have Warhammer 40k Fire Warrior. This was a huge letdown. It's the only first-person shooter in the Warhammer 40k universe, or set in the Warhammer 40k universe, I should say. And guess what you play as? A Tau. A filthy, horrid Xenos scum! But it's not very good at all. Really, one would want to play as either the Imperial Guard or the Space Marines, but since you don't, you've even got more of an expectation on the Tau to actually deliver, since he's not somebody you'd want to play anyway. It's just a mediocre FPS that is just a letdown in every way, shape, or form. Here we have Black. This is not a letdown. It's a first-person shooter, and sure, it's straightforward. All you do is go around and shoot things. But the weapons look really good. I do have to praise that, especially on the PS2. It really is surprising the level of graphical complexity they were able to work in. Here we have the greatest game of them all, the blank case. But you open that blank case, find a receipt, and, more importantly, Predator Concrete Jungle. I originally had this on the Xbox, but I sold my Xbox and all my games, so I had to rebuy it, and it definitely was worth it, to say the least. Essentially, I already did a video on it not too long ago. It's a third-person action platformer, and it's surprising how good the story is, to say the least. Although, not if you actually see who wrote it. Grant Morrison was the one who did the story, and he's actually a pretty good writer in his own right. Here we have Time Splitters Future Perfect. The graphics are pretty good. It's a first-person shooter. The guns are pretty good. And also, the story is actually quite humorous, to say the least. It does have a multiplayer, but since you can't actually get online with the PS2 anymore, it's still fun in that you can add bots and actually increase the lifespan of the game. Here we have the first Time Splitters, and I bought this fairly recently, just wanting to try to see what the entire series was like, and it's pretty bad. It's just so unbelievably basic. It's definitely inferior to Future Perfect, but I will say this was the first in the series, and this was the third, so they had time to essentially perfect their technique. Here we have Area 51. It's another first-person shooter, and the graphics are just amazing. You wouldn't expect that the PS2 would be able to do what this game does. Now, it actually said that this is like the Halo for the PlayStation 2, and I have to say, it is. It just looks amazing. The storyline is also pretty good, and the main voice actor is David Duchovny. This is something straight out of X-Files, essentially, and it's a great deal of fun indeed. Although, I will say this before I take it away. This game was exceedingly difficult to find. I went to like 3 game stores, not one of them had it. Eventually, I had to look on Amazon, and even then, they only had like a couple of copies. Oh, here we have Mercenaries Playground of Destruction. This is a third-person open-world game. This was actually the very first open-world game I ever played, and this is probably the one game I sank the most hours into on the PS2. I mean, you just go around blowing up tanks and shooting hapless foot soldiers. You can't go wrong with it. It was also one of the few games that I remember from that time period where you could like get in the helicopters and just strafe things. It was just a tremendous amount of fun. Here we have Star Wars, or Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, which makes no sense. The original trilogy came first, so it really should have been Lego Star Wars 1, but oh well. When these games came out, it was after that prequel trilogy was there, and well, they wanted that one to be first, I suppose. In any event, this game had a great sense of humor. It's a third-person arcade-style exploration puzzle game, essentially. It's where all your Star Wars characters are Legos. This one turned out to be really quite good, to say the least. I didn't sink that many hours into it, but I was able to unlock everything without the use of cheats. Here we have Red Faction, a game I bought fairly recently, maybe like 6 months ago. It's a first-person shooter, but the graphics, to me anyway, are pretty bad. It is supposed to use, and it did, the Geomod engine that lets you destroy different environments and things of that nature. But unfortunately, it's not really as good, I think, as advertised. To me, it was just exceedingly mediocre. Now here's a game that's another classic, Deus Ex: The Conspiracy. This is essentially the PS2 port of a game on the PC that is also widely regarded as one of the greats. This is essentially a first-person shooter RPG. And really, it's exceptional in the fact that this is one of the very few science fiction RPGs. Most of the RPGs are set during the medieval times for some reason. Really, this is one of the few ones that can come to mind when you think of science fiction RPGs. The fact that it's a first-person perspective is something else entirely. The storyline's pretty good, and the gameplay is fairly decent, I have to say. The graphics do leave a little to be desired, but overall, it's a pretty good port of the PC version. And here we have God of War. What to say about this one? Many people like the God of War series. I don't think it's a bad game, by any means, but I was less than impressed. It's fun, but I never really could get into the whole hack and slash genre, to say the least.